He started his morning the same way he always did, with a cup of black coffee, a quick look at his phone, and a quiet sigh before heading out for work. The small apartment he lived in wasn't much, but it was enough for him. He had a routine, a rhythm to his life. Every day brought a new delivery, a new address, a new stranger to help. Some days were easy, others were long and heavy, but he never complained. That morning, his phone buzzed with a message from the moving app he worked through. A new request had come in. The note was simple. Need help moving a bed and a few boxes into a new apartment. He accepted the job right away. It didn't look like much, but every bit helped. Rent wasn't cheap, and the bills didn't stop just because he was tired. He loaded his van with the moving straps, blankets, and a dolly, then hit the road. The sun had barely climbed above the buildings when he started driving. The streets were quiet, and the air was still cool from the night before. He liked early jobs like this. Less traffic, fewer people, more peace. The address led him to a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy, but it looked safe and calm. As he pulled up, he saw a woman standing near the curb looking at her phone and glancing around as if she was waiting for someone. She waved when she spotted his van and smiled in relief. She looked tired, like someone who had been through a long week of packing and organizing. He parked the van, stepped out, and gave her a polite nod. "Morning," he said simply. "Hey, thanks for coming," she replied with a smile that was both warm and a little nervous. "I didn't think anyone would take the job this early." "No problem," he said, grabbing his gloves. "So what are we moving today?" "Just my bed, a few boxes, and a dresser," she said. "I moved here yesterday, and the delivery guys couldn't bring the big stuff upstairs. I've been sleeping on the floor." She laughed awkwardly, almost embarrassed. He nodded and followed her inside. The hallway smelled faintly of fresh paint. Her apartment was half furnished. Boxes stacked in corners, curtains still folded on the table, and a couple of chairs sitting by the wall. It had that empty, echoing sound new places have before they feel like home. He went straight to work. The bed frame was heavier than it looked, and the mattress was awkward to carry alone. She offered to help, but he waved her off gently. "Don't worry, I've got it," he said, balancing the frame on his shoulder. She insisted anyway, holding the door and keeping conversation going. "So do you do this full-time?" she asked as he maneuvered the bed through the hallway. "Pretty much," he said. "Been doing deliveries for a while now. Furniture, appliances, small moves, whatever people need." "Sounds exhausting," she said, stepping aside as he passed. "You must meet all kinds of people," he chuckled. "Yeah, I do. Some are nice, some not so much," she laughed softly. "I can imagine." They carried on like that, small talk filling the quiet between the scraping of furniture and the shuffle of boxes. She wasn't one of those customers who just stood back and watched. She tried to help where she could. Even though it was clear she wasn't used to lifting heavy things, she'd pick up small boxes, make space, and keep asking questions about his work, about the city, about things that didn't really matter but made time move faster. At one point, as he tightened the last screw on the bed frame, she leaned against the wall and said, "You know, I didn't expect someone to actually show up. I've had a rough week with movers not showing or canceling last minute. You kind of saved my day." He smiled and wiped the sweat from his forehead. "I'm just doing my job." "Still," she said, "you showed up when no one else did. That counts for something." He didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and got back to work. He wasn't the type to talk about himself much. Most people didn't ask anyway. But something about her tone, the way she spoke with genuine gratitude, made him feel a little lighter inside. As the hours passed, the job moved along quickly. They took short breaks here and there, mostly because she'd stop him with some random story or question. She talked about how she'd just moved to the city after a long relationship ended. She said she wanted a fresh start, somewhere no one knew her. He listened quietly, nodding at the right moments. She seemed like the kind of person who needed to talk, not for attention, but just to feel seen. At one point, she brought 2 glasses of cold water from the kitchen and handed him one. "You must be used to this heat," she said. "I try to be," he said with a small laugh. "But it still gets to me." They both laughed, and for a second it didn't feel like a worker and client, just 2 people having a moment of small connection. There was something genuine in how she spoke to him. She wasn't talking down or trying to make small talk to fill the silence. She seemed interested, present. When the last piece of furniture was finally in place, he started packing up his tools. That should do it, he said, looking around. The room looked much more like a home now. The bed was set, boxes were neatly stacked, and sunlight poured in through the open curtains. She walked around, taking it all in. "It looks so much better already," she said. "You really helped me out." He nodded. "Glad to hear that." Then, just as he was about to head out, she looked at him with a smile, a slightly teasing one, and said, "You know, you're exactly my type, you know that?" He froze for a second, unsure if she was serious. The words hung in the air between them, light but full of meaning. He let out a short laugh, not wanting to make it awkward. "Oh yeah," he said. "That's a funny thing to say after moving furniture all day." She laughed too, a bit embarrassed now. "I didn't mean it like that," she said quickly, though her cheeks were a little pink. "I just meant you seem real. You're kind, patient. Not many people are like that anymore." He nodded, still smiling, unsure how to respond. "Well, thank you. That's nice of you to say." There was a short silence, the kind that wasn't uncomfortable but somehow full of unspoken thoughts. She looked at him like she wanted to say more but didn't. He adjusted his gloves, picked up his toolkit, and said, "I'll send you the confirmation through the app, all right?" "Sure," she said, still smiling softly. "And, thank you again, really." He gave a small nod and stepped out the door. As he walked back to his van, he couldn't help but replay her words in his mind. "You're exactly my type." Maybe she meant it as a compliment. Maybe just a passing comment. Either way, it stuck with him. He loaded his tools and sat in the driver's seat for a moment, taking a deep breath. The day was far from over. He still had 2 more jobs lined up. But something about that morning felt different. It wasn't just another delivery. There had been something human in it, something simple but rare. He'd met hundreds of people through his work, but few ever looked at him the way she did, not as just the guy moving boxes, but as a person. As he started the van and pulled away, he glanced once more in the rearview mirror. She was standing by her door, waving goodbye. He waved back, a small smile forming as he turned the corner. Driving through the afternoon traffic, he thought about how life worked in strange ways. One small job, one random request, and suddenly you're part of someone's story. Even if just for a day. He didn't know if he'd ever see her again. Maybe she'd forget about him by tomorrow. Maybe she wouldn't. But for now, he was content with the thought that kindness and small moments like that still existed in the world. He turned on the radio, rolled down the window, and let the breeze hit his face. The next job alert came through on his phone, but he didn't rush to accept it right away. He just drove, letting the city pass by slowly. That brief connection, her smile, her warmth, that strange line she'd said, lingered in his thoughts. Life, he realized, wasn't about big moments. It was about these small, unexpected ones that made you pause even just for a second, and remind yourself that people, in their truest form, still have goodness in them. And as the sun dipped behind the buildings, painting the sky with soft shades of gold, he couldn't help but smile again. A quiet smile that came not from luck or success, but from a simple truth. Sometimes, even in the most ordinary jobs, something extraordinary can happen. The next morning started quietly. He woke up before sunrise just like every other day. The air felt cooler than usual, and there was a calm stillness outside his window. He made his usual cup of coffee, sat on the edge of his small kitchen table, and scrolled through the moving app on his phone. There were a few new job requests, but his eyes lingered for a moment on something else. A message from yesterday's client. It wasn't long or formal. Just a few words. "Thank you again for yesterday. I really appreciate your help." He stared at the message for a few seconds before replying, "No problem. Glad I could help. Hope the new place feels more like home now." He didn't expect a reply right away, so he put the phone down and started getting ready. But before he could leave, it buzzed again. "It's getting there. I still have boxes everywhere, though. Might need your help again if you're free." He smiled without meaning to. Usually once a job was done, that was it. He rarely heard back from clients unless something went wrong. But there was something genuine about her words. Not demanding, not awkward. Just simple and kind, he typed back. "Sure, just let me know when." Then he grabbed his keys and headed out. The day moved on like usual, one job after another. But every now and then, his mind drifted back to her message. There was something about her tone that stayed with him. A mix of friendliness and warmth that he didn't come across often. By the afternoon, He was hauling a refrigerator up a narrow staircase when another message buzzed through. I just unpacked my kitchen and realized I have way too many dishes. When you're free, could you help me take a few things to storage? He paused for a second, catching his breath. Yeah, I can help after my shift, he replied. By the time he pulled up outside her building again, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. She was waiting by the entrance, waving with that same easy smile as yesterday. You actually came, she said, sounding pleasantly surprised. I said I would, he replied, smiling slightly. What are we moving this time? She laughed softly and led him inside. Just a few boxes. I promise it's lighter work today. Her apartment looked more lived in now. The bed was neatly made. Pictures leaned against the wall waiting to be hung. And there was the faint smell of coffee and candles. She looked more relaxed too, like she was finally settling in. As they lifted the first box, she started talking again. Not the small kind of talk that people use to fill silence, but real conversation. She asked him about his family, where he grew up, how long he'd been doing this kind of work. He wasn't used to people asking about his life, so he gave short answers at first. He told her about how he used to work in construction before getting into deliveries, about how hard it was to keep steady jobs when companies downsized, and about how driving gave him freedom, even if it didn't always pay much. She listened closely, really listening, not the polite kind of listening most people give. Every time he paused, she'd ask something thoughtful, or smile and say, "That makes sense." At one point, while setting a box down, he glanced at her and said, "You talk a lot, you know that?" She laughed. "I know. I can't help it. I've been alone for too long, and I guess I miss having real conversations." He nodded. "Yeah, I get that." They carried on like that, moving boxes, swapping small pieces of their lives. She talked about her job at a small design company, how it was stressful but creative, and how moving to this new place was supposed to be her way of starting fresh. She'd left behind people who didn't make her feel seen. She didn't go into details, but he could tell there was a story behind it. When they finished, she offered him something to drink again. This time, he didn't say no. They sat down in her living room, surrounded by half-open boxes, sipping cold soda. The city lights outside flickered through the window, and for a while they just sat there quietly. "You know what's funny?" she said after a moment. "Yesterday when you were fixing the bed, I almost didn't say that thing, the whole 'you're my type' comment. It just slipped out," he laughed. "Yeah, that kind of caught me off guard." She covered her face with her hands, laughing too. "I know, I didn't mean it to sound weird. I don't know. You seemed different. Not just polite, but real. Most people rush through things. You actually looked like you cared," he shrugged. "I guess I just try to do my job right. People pay for service, but they deserve respect too." She looked at him for a moment, her smile softening. That's rare these days. He didn't say anything back, but he felt something shift quietly between them. Not romance, not anything dramatic, just an understanding, a kind of respect that didn't need explaining. The clock on the wall ticked softly, and the evening light turned dim. She looked around her new place and said, "You know, when I first moved here, I thought I'd feel excited, but it's just been lonely. New city, new apartment, no friends yet." He nodded. "It takes time. I move people in and out all the time. Some of them start fresh, but it's hard when you don't know anyone." "Yeah," she said quietly. "That's exactly how it feels." Something about the honesty in her voice made him pause. He wasn't sure what to say, so he just said, "You'll be fine." "You seem strong." She smiled at that. "You think so?" "Yeah," he said simply. "You handled all those boxes, didn't you?" She laughed, shaking her head. "You're funny," he grinned. "I try." After a few minutes, he stood up to leave. "I should get going. Got an early job tomorrow." She followed him to the door, still smiling. "Thanks again for helping today." "No problem," he said. "Call me if you need more stuff moved." "I just might," she said, her tone light but meaningful. He stepped into the hallway, and before he could walk away, she called out softly, "Hey." He turned around. "I meant what I said yesterday," she said. "You really are my type. Not just because of how you look, but because of how you are." He didn't know how to respond, so he just gave a small, honest smile and said, "That's nice to hear." Then he nodded once and walked away, his footsteps echoing softly down the hallway. When he got back to his van, he sat there for a while thinking. He'd had all kinds of customers before. Rude ones, quiet ones, grateful ones. But she was different. There was something about her openness, her willingness to talk to him like an equal, that made the day feel less like work. As he drove home, he thought about how people cross paths for reasons we don't always understand. Maybe she just needed someone to help her move boxes and talk for a bit. Maybe he needed someone to remind him that even in the middle of his daily grind, there were still people out there who saw him as more than just the delivery guy. The next few days passed quietly, but her words kept echoing in his mind. He caught himself smiling at random moments, thinking about her laugh, her stories, the way she thanked him like she truly meant it. One night, as he was finishing dinner, his phone buzzed again. It was her. I finally finished unpacking. The place looks like a home now. I couldn't have done it without your help. If you're ever around, you should stop by for coffee. I owe you one. He stared at the message for a while, not sure what to think. Part of him hesitated. He'd never mixed personal life with work. But another part of him, the quieter, lonelier part, felt curious. He typed back slowly. Coffee sounds good. I'll let you know when I'm nearby. He set his phone down and leaned back, a small smile on his face. Maybe life was trying to show him something. That sometimes, real connections didn't need fancy beginnings or perfect timing. Sometimes they just started with a bed that needed moving and a few honest words spoken in between. He didn't know where it would lead, and he wasn't in a rush to find out. For now, it was enough to know that kindness, even in small moments, had a way of changing two ordinary days into something worth remembering. The week went by quickly, filled with deliveries, noise, and long hours behind the wheel. He kept busy just the way he liked it. But even in the middle of heavy lifting and loud traffic, his thoughts often drifted back to that quiet apartment, to her smile, and the easy way she spoke to him as if they'd known each other forever. He wasn't used to people seeing him that way. Most of the time, he was invisible. Just another man doing a job, moving boxes, helping people start new chapters they rarely remembered him being part of. But she had looked at him differently. She'd asked about his day, his life, even his thoughts. It had felt human. It was a Wednesday afternoon when his phone buzzed again. The message read, "We still owe you that coffee. You anywhere near downtown today?" He smiled at the timing. He had just finished a job a few streets away. He typed back, "Actually, yeah. Got about an hour before my next stop." "Perfect," she replied almost instantly. "Come by if you can." He hesitated for a second, glancing at his schedule. Then he sighed, leaned back in his seat, and decided that maybe it wouldn't hurt to stop by for a few minutes. When he reached her place, the door was already open a little, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee drifted into the hallway. She looked more at ease this time, dressed casually, hair tied back, and her smile came naturally. "Hey," she said. "I was starting to think you'd forgotten." He grinned. "I don't forget about free coffee." She laughed softly and motioned for him to come in. Her apartment looked different now. The boxes were gone, the curtains were up, and the space had warmth to it. Pictures on the wall, books on the shelf, and a small plant sitting near the window. It felt like a real home. She handed him a mug and said, "Careful, it's hot." "Thanks," he said, taking it and sitting at the small kitchen table. The air between them felt calm, familiar, like they had done this before. They started talking again naturally. She told him about her first week at work in the new city, how everything felt new and slightly overwhelming. He talked about the people he'd met through his deliveries, the strange places he'd been to, and how every home had its own story. "You must have seen a lot," she said, stirring her coffee slowly. "Yeah," he said. "People moving in, moving out, sometimes crying, sometimes laughing. It's strange how furniture can hold so many memories." She looked at him thoughtfully. "You sound like someone who pays attention to the little things." He shrugged. "Maybe. I guess when you spend a lot of time around people, you start noticing what matters to them." She smiled. "That's probably why I like talking to you so much. You actually listen." He looked down at his coffee and smiled quietly. Compliments weren't something he heard often, and when he did, they usually felt empty. But hers didn't. A few minutes passed in silence, the kind that didn't feel awkward. She looked out the window and said, "It's strange how life works. A few weeks ago I was unpacking boxes alone, and now here I am, drinking coffee with the guy who carried them." He chuckled. "Guess that's how stories start sometimes." She turned to look at him. "You think everything happens for a reason?" He thought about it for a moment. Maybe not everything. But sometimes, yeah. Some things just line up too perfectly to be random. She nodded slowly, her eyes soft. Yeah, maybe this was one of those things. He didn't say anything, just took another sip of coffee. There was something comforting about the way she said that. Not romantic, not dramatic, just sincere. Like she'd been needing a real connection for a while, and finally found one that felt safe. After a while, she started talking about her family, about how they'd grown distant over the years, how she'd felt like she was always trying to fit into someone else's idea of what her life should look like. I think that's why I moved, she said. I wanted to build something that felt like mine, even if it's small, even if it's quiet. He listened carefully, nodding. Sometimes starting over is the bravest thing you can do. She smiled a little sadly. You ever had to start over? He leaned back and thought for a second. Yeah, a few times. Lost my job a few years ago. Took a while to figure things out. Some days were rough. But you keep moving, you know? She looked at him with quiet respect. You make it sound simple. He shook his head. It wasn't, but I learned something. When life gets heavy, you don't have to lift it all at once. Just a little at a time. She smiled softly. That's a nice way to put it. The conversation drifted from serious topics to lighter ones. Favorite foods, movies they liked, funny stories from work. Time passed without either of them noticing. He realized he'd been there for nearly 2 hours when his phone buzzed again, reminding him of his next job. I should get going, he said, standing up reluctantly. She looked a little disappointed but nodded. Of course. You've probably got a busy day. Yeah, he said, but thanks for the coffee. Thanks for showing up, she replied, smiling. Most people say they will and never do. He paused for a second before replying, Yeah, but I'm not most people. Her smile widened. I can tell. As he left, she followed him to the door again, just like before. He turned back once and she said, You're easy to talk to. It's nice, he gave a small nod. You too. Then he stepped out into the hallway, still feeling the warmth of her words. Driving away, he couldn't stop thinking about how natural everything felt around her. It wasn't like they were trying to impress each other. It was just two people talking. No expectations, no pretending. That kind of honesty was rare. The following days, they kept in touch through short messages. Nothing deep, just small check-ins like, hope your day's going well or traffic was terrible today. But even those small exchanges brought a quiet joy to his day. One evening, after a long shift, he got another message from her. There's a community event this weekend at the park near my place. You should come if you're free. It's just music and food, but it might be fun. He thought about it. He wasn't much of a crowd person, but the idea of seeing her again made him smile. I'll try, he wrote back. When the weekend came, he almost talked himself out of going. He told himself it wasn't a big deal, that he didn't really belong at those kinds of gatherings. But something inside pushed him to go anyway. When he arrived, the park was full of people, laughter, and the sound of live music. He looked around until he spotted her near a food stall, waving him over. She looked genuinely happy to see him. I was starting to think you wouldn't come, she said. Almost didn't, he admitted, smiling. Glad I did, though. They spent the evening walking around the park, trying food from different stalls, talking about everything and nothing. Every now and then, someone she knew would wave or stop to chat, and she'd introduce him easily without hesitation. She didn't treat him like just the guy who helped her move. She treated him like someone who mattered. At one point, as they sat on a bench watching the lights flicker across the park, she said quietly, You know, when I said you were my type that day, I didn't mean it the way it sounded. I just meant, I like people who are real. You are. He looked at her for a moment and smiled. I get it now, she turned to him. Do you? Yeah, he said softly. I think I do. They sat there for a while, watching kids run around and families laugh in the distance. The air was filled with the smell of food and the soft sound of music. For a moment, everything felt still, peaceful, like the noise of the world had faded away. As the night went on, they walked back toward the parking lot. She looked at him and said, It's nice having someone to talk to who doesn't expect anything. He nodded. Yeah, sometimes that's all people really need. They said goodbye, and as he drove home that night, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a quiet kind of happiness. It wasn't about romance or promises. It was about connection. Two people from completely different lives had found a moment of peace together. simply because they treated each other with kindness. And as he looked at the road stretching ahead of him, he realized something. Sometimes the best parts of life don't come from plans or perfect timing. They come from the unexpected people who cross your path and remind you that even in a busy, noisy world, there's still room for understanding, respect, and genuine care. The morning after the park event, he woke up with a light feeling in his chest. It wasn't excitement exactly, more like peace. Life still felt the same. Bills waiting, long hours, the hum of the city outside. But inside, something had changed quietly. Maybe it was that conversation on the park bench. Maybe it was her words about real people. Whatever it was, it made his day start softer. He got ready for work and stepped outside into the cool air. The streets were waking up, buses rumbling by, shopkeepers unlocking their doors. He liked this time of day, when everything felt fresh and calm before the noise began. As he started his van, his phone buzzed. It was her again. "Hope you slept well. Thanks for coming yesterday. I had a good time." He smiled, tapping out a reply. "Yeah, I did too. It was a nice break from work," she responded with a small smiley face. It was simple, but it made him grin anyway. The week rolled by quietly. He went back to his usual schedule, loading and unloading furniture, helping people move through their own stories. But every couple of days they texted. Nothing forced, just little check-ins. Sometimes she'd send a funny picture of something she saw on her way to work. Sometimes he'd tell her about a weird delivery he'd done that day. Their messages had a rhythm now, like a small part of each other's routine. Then one evening, as he was finishing a job across town, she called. Not texted, called. He wiped the sweat off his hands and answered. "Hey," she said, her voice soft but a little anxious. "You busy right now?" "Just finished work," he said. "What's up?" There was a short pause. "My kitchen light went out. I tried fixing it, but I think I made it worse." "Any chance you know how to deal with that kind of thing?" He laughed quietly. "I can try. I'm no electrician, but I've replaced a few lights in my time. Would you mind?" she asked almost shyly. "I'd call maintenance, but they said it might take a couple of days." "Sure," he said. "I'll swing by." When he arrived, her apartment was dim except for a small lamp glowing in the corner. She looked relieved to see him. "I didn't think you'd actually come this late." "I told you," he said with a small grin. "I don't like leaving people in the dark." She laughed, shaking her head. "You and your lines." He went to work on the light while she stood nearby holding a flashlight for him. They joked and talked like old friends. At one point she said, "You know, you could have just told me to wait until morning. Most people would." He looked down from the stool. "Maybe. But you're not most people." She blinked, caught off guard for a second, then smiled softly. "You always know how to say things that stick." When the light finally flickered back on, she clapped her hands together. "You did it, see?" "I told you you're good at everything," he laughed. "Not everything. Just fixing lights and moving beds, apparently." They both laughed, and then there was a small pause. The air felt warm and still. She looked at him, her smile fading into something quieter, something more thoughtful. "You're a good man," she said softly. "You really are." He didn't know how to respond to that. Compliments like that always made him uncomfortable. So he just smiled a little and said, "I just try to help where I can." They ended up sitting in the living room after that, just talking. The light above them buzzed faintly, but it worked fine. She brought 2 mugs of tea, and they sat there in comfortable silence for a while before she spoke again. "You know what I realized tonight?" she said, stirring her tea slowly. "I don't miss my old life anymore. I used to think about it all the time there, the people I left, the city I left. But since I moved here, since I started over, and since I met you, I don't think about it as much." He looked up at her, listening quietly. "I think it's because you remind me that there are still good people out there," she continued. "You don't act like you're better than anyone. You don't expect anything from anyone. You just show up and do good things because it's who you are." He didn't know what to say, but her words stayed with him. Nobody had ever said something like that to him before. Not in that tone, not with that kind of honesty. He set his cup down and said softly, "You give me too much credit." She smiled gently. "No, I don't think I do." The clock ticked softly in the background. It was getting late, but neither of them moved to end the conversation. Time seemed slower there, quieter. After a few minutes, he stood up. "I should get going," he said. "It's past midnight." She got up too and walked him to the door. "Thanks again for coming." "You really didn't have to," he smiled. "I wanted to." She hesitated, then said quietly, "You always make things feel easy, you know that?" He looked at her for a moment, not sure what to say. "That's a good thing, right?" She nodded. "Yeah, it is." He left with that feeling again, that strange, calm warmth he couldn't quite explain. As he drove home, he thought about what she'd said, how she didn't miss her old life anymore. He realized that she wasn't the only one changing. In some small way, she was changing him too. He started noticing the world differently, small things he used to ignore. The way people smiled at each other in traffic, the way the city looked just before sunset, the sound of laughter spilling out from cafes. It was like meeting her had softened the edges of his life. The next week, he got a few days off work, a rare break he hadn't planned. He texted her, "Got some free time for once." "You busy?" She replied almost instantly, "Not at all." "Want to come over? I finally finished decorating the place." When he arrived, her apartment looked completely transformed. The walls were full of pictures. Plants sat on every shelf and soft music played in the background. She looked proud, showing him around like it was a new house. "What do you think?" she asked, her eyes bright. "It looks great," he said honestly. "Feels alive now." She smiled. "That's exactly what I wanted." They spent the afternoon together, rearranging a few things, laughing about her terrible attempt at hanging frames straight, and sharing stories about growing up. He told her about his mother's cooking, about how his family used to gather around the table every Sunday no matter what. She listened, smiling softly the whole time, then she said, "You talk about your family with so much warmth. You must miss them." He nodded. "Yeah, I do. But they taught me something important. No matter how far you go, the good people you meet along the way become part of your family too." Her eyes softened. "That's beautiful." The sun started to set, painting the apartment in shades of orange and gold. They stood by the window for a while, watching the light fade. She turned to him and said, "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't taken that job that day." He smiled. "Someone else would have helped you." "Maybe," she said. "But they wouldn't have been you." There was a quiet honesty in her voice that filled the room. They didn't need to say more after that. It wasn't about romance or anything dramatic. It was about understanding. Two people who had found comfort in each other's presence without needing anything in return. When it got dark, he stood up to leave. "Thanks for inviting me," he said. "Thank you for coming," she replied. "You always bring good energy with you." He laughed softly. "Guess I'll take that as a compliment," she smiled. "You should." As he walked out that night, he realized something important. The world often made people rush through work, through days, through life itself. But somehow with her, time slowed down. Their connection wasn't fast or loud. It was quiet, steady, and real. Driving home, he rolled down the window and let the cool night air hit his face. The streets were empty. The city lights glowed softly, and he felt content. He didn't know where this bond would go or how long it would last. But he knew one thing for sure, and sometimes, the most meaningful relationships aren't about love or labels. They're about seeing and being seen. About kindness that expects nothing. About two lives brushing against each other at just the right moment. And in that simple truth, he found peace. Weeks went by and life started moving forward again. The delivery man was back to his regular routine, early mornings, long drives, and the familiar hum of work. But things didn't feel as heavy anymore. Somewhere between the sound of tires on the road and the hum of the city, he found small moments of peace. Maybe it was because of her. Maybe it was because she reminded him that kindness still mattered. He still helped her sometimes. Small things here and there. Once he fixed her bookshelf that leaned too much to one side. Another time, he brought her a few plants from a friend's nursery because she had said she wanted more green in her apartment. Each visit was easy and natural, like visiting an old friend. They didn't talk about their connection much. They just let it be what it was, something simple, honest, and kind. One afternoon, he got a message from her. "Hey, there's a small community event this weekend at the park. Local music, food stalls, and crafts. You should come." He stared at the message for a few seconds, thinking. He had a delivery that morning but could probably make it after lunch. He replied, "I'll try to come by." Saturday came and the park was buzzing with life. The smell of grilled food filled the air and children ran around chasing bubbles. He spotted her near a table where people were setting up handmade crafts. She waved, smiling wide when she saw him. "You made it," she said, walking toward him. "Wouldn't miss it," he said. "This place looks great." They spent the afternoon wandering through the event, tasting food from stalls and laughing at how bad they both were at guessing raffle ticket numbers. She introduced him to a few of her new friends, and he could see how much she had changed since the day he first met her. Back then she was quiet, almost unsure of herself. Now she carried herself differently, with calm confidence and warmth. At one point they sat down on a low brick wall near the stage, where a local band was playing soft music. She looked around the park and said, "You know, I think I finally feel like I belong here." He looked at her and smiled. "You do. You made this place your own." She nodded, then said quietly, "It's funny how life works. You think you're just moving furniture, starting over, trying to forget something old, and then you meet someone who changes how you see everything." He tilted his head slightly. "You mean me?" She smiled. "Of course I do. You showed up that day just to help me move a bed, and somehow you ended up helping me move forward too." He looked down, smiling shyly. "You make it sound like I did something special." "You did," she said softly. "You just don't realize it." They sat in silence for a while after that, just listening to the music and watching the crowd. The sun began to set behind the trees, casting long golden shadows. It was one of those quiet, perfect moments that didn't need words. After the event ended, they walked to the parking lot together. Before leaving, she said, "I've been thinking of starting something small, like a local project to help people settle in when they move here. You know, a way to connect people who feel lost like I did." He nodded. "That's a great idea. You've got the heart for it," she smiled. "Would you help me? I could use someone who knows how to deal with people, someone who understands what it's like to start from nothing." He thought about it for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, I'd like that." Over the next few weeks, they started working on it together. It wasn't anything big, just a small community program that helped new residents find local services, job leads, and friendly faces. They'd meet at cafes, plan flyers, and talk to local shops. Slowly, word spread. People started joining. Some offered their time, some offered resources, and through it all, their friendship grew stronger. One afternoon, after they finished hanging up posters around the neighborhood, she looked at him and said, "You know, you were right about something." "What's that?" he asked. "That not every connection has to be defined. Sometimes it's just two people meeting at the right time, helping each other heal without even realizing it." He smiled softly. "Yeah, I guess that's true." She looked at him for a moment, then added, "I'm glad it was you who helped me move that bed that day." He chuckled. "I'm glad you didn't ask someone else." They both laughed. But under the laughter was something deeper, a quiet gratitude they both felt but didn't need to say out loud. Months passed, and their little project started to grow. Local businesses offered support, and the community began to feel closer than ever. He became known not just as the delivery guy, but as the man who helped people settle in, the one who always showed up with a calm smile and steady hands. One day, after a small community meeting, she handed him a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" he asked. "Just read it when you get home," she said with a smile. That night after dinner, he unfolded it. Inside was a short note. "You once said life's about the good people you meet along the way. You became one of those people for me. Thank you for being exactly who you are." At the bottom was a small printed photo, the two of them from the park event, laughing at something out of frame. He sat there for a long time looking at the photo. It wasn't about romance. It wasn't about grand gestures. It was about something purer, respect, connection, and the power of small kindnesses. The next day, he stopped by her apartment with a small gift, a framed version of the same photo, but with a handwritten note underneath that said, "Glad I was there to move more than just furniture." When she saw it, she laughed softly and said, "You always know what to say, Don.